This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Before I talk anything sports, I want to remind you all to subscribe to the podcast so you always get those alerts on your phone, your laptop, whatever device you might be listening on. And again, you always get those notifications so you always know when we release a new episode. Also, make sure to leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcasting app or website you are listening to this on. We would really appreciate that as well. And also make sure to follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We love to interact with you guys on there as much as possible. So if you give us a follow on those social media platforms, we can discuss topics about the show, recent sports games going on. It would be so much fun. So make sure you follow us on all those social media platforms. Again, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I hope wherever you are and however may you be listening, you and your family are happy and they are healthy during these times. We have a fantastic show for you guys today. The NBA bubble keeps on chugging. I'm going to be recapping a lot of the teams' games, including the Lakers, the Rockets, the Pelicans, a bunch of other teams as well. So we'll get into everything NBA restart, everything playoff push, everything finishing of the regular season. I'm so happy the NBA is back. The NBA has been providing some really awesome games as well. So we're just going to be talking about a lot of the games that happened over the past couple of days and what it means for some of these teams that are either making the playoffs, trying to make that push, or some of these teams that are competing for a championship. Also, later on in the show, I'll be getting into some NFL. There's some news coming out about Antonio Brown potentially going to the Seattle Seahawks, which is very, very interesting as well, to say the least. And also, the Bucks added LaShawn McCoy, the veteran running back, so we'll getting into that later in the show. Well, probably towards the end, so you want to stick around for that. We'll recap all the NFL news at the end of the show, and we'll, do the first part of the show all NBA. We're going to start here with the Los Angeles Lakers, who had a big bounce-back victory tonight against the Utah Jazz. I'll talk about the Jazz as well in this segment. But the Los Angeles Lakers, after taking a really tough loss to the Toronto Raptors the other day, really bounced back tonight against the Utah Jazz. I have to say LeBron James really bounced back as well. He has only been averaging, I think, between 16 and 18 points during those first two games. LeBron came back firing today, 22 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists on a really efficient shooting numbers as well. He was great tonight. LeBron's always going to be LeBron. He's always going to do what he does. I wasn't very, too concerned with the first two bubble games. People were a little bit concerned about, his shooting, his stats. He wasn't getting the same amount of points that we're so used to LeBron James getting. And also, LeBron James, the first two games, maybe looked like he had lost a step athletically. He almost looked like he was playing a little bit slower than he usually does as well. And now, of course, everyone's going to bring up the concerns of age, athleticism, everything like that. But LeBron James looked great tonight. He looked athletic, he looked strong, he looked fast. I think he just had to get his legs from under him playing legitimate, real NBA minutes tonight. With the win against the Jazz, the Lakers clinched the number 1 seed in the West, which is huge for them. They don't have to worry about a team like, the Clippers or something catching up to them. It's huge to have the number 1 seed in the West, in my opinion, because I think the 8th spot in the West there's such a gap, but I think between the Mavericks, who are probably going to be the 7th seed, and the 8th team, I think the Mavericks are just such way more of a better team than a team like the Pelicans, the Grizzlies, the Pelicans if they get in, the Spurs if they get in as well. We'll talk about that playoff push later in the show. There's just a big gap between playing the Mavericks in a 7-game series versus playing one of those teams. Could be the difference between you sweeping a team or going into a late series, a 6 or 7-game series, and that matters when going into the playoffs with energy and stamina and things like that. So it was a big win for the Lakers tonight. But LeBron James wasn't even the reason why the Los Angeles Lakers won tonight. The reason why the Los Angeles Lakers won tonight was because of Anthony freaking Davis. Now, AD, the first 2 games, was putting up good numbers, not against Toronto, obviously, but the first game against the Clippers, he had a great game. Against Toronto, he wasn't very aggressive. He wasn't looking for a shot. Nobody really was on the Lakers. And AD made it a mission to come out in today's game and be aggressive. He took 14 shots in the first quarter. He had, again, a phenomenal game. Anthony Davis tonight, 42 points, 12 rebounds, and 4 assists. An absolutely ridiculous number for him. Now, I want to talk about a couple of things with the Lakers, and this is going to, stay on theme with what I've been talking about, how the Lakers are not a championship team. While the Lakers win tonight was awesome. Anthony Davis looked phenomenal. LeBron James looked great. Almost had a 22-point triple-double tonight, like I mentioned earlier. Again, all of these games for me are just reassuring that I'm not positive that the Los Angeles Lakers are a championship team. Again, a fantastic win tonight by the Lakers. But what does it take for the Lakers to beat the Utah Jazz, who are arguably going through some dysfunction right now with their star Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell? There seems to be some sort of turmoil there, or some sort of something's off with the Utah Jazz. Donovan Mitchell doesn't look, enthusiastic, like he doesn't look happy to be there right now. There's obviously those reports of him and Rudy Gobert not getting along. The Jazz just look lackluster, right? And they haven't gotten off to a good start in the bubble at all either. And for them to beat that Jazz team tonight, only by 8, the final score was 116-108. It took Anthony Davis getting 42 points, 12 rebounds, 4 assists, and LeBron James getting 22, 8, and 9, just for the Lakers to beat the Utah Jazz by 8. And again, if you watch the game, you know that the game got cut all the way to 6, and I think all the way to 4 in the final 2 minutes of the game after the Lakers had, I believe, a 15-point lead. That's concerning if you're a Los Angeles Lakers fan, right? And if you're an NBA fan in general, right? JaVale McGee tonight, no points. KCP had a nice night with 10. Danny Green with 8. Kyle Kuzma with 9. Caruso with 3. Waiters with 7. Howard had 11. And J.R. Smith with 4, right? This is my problem with the Los Angeles Lakers. It's a two-man team. LeBron and AD have to be on their A game every single night, if not beyond their A game. Otherwise, the Lakers just aren't going to win games against really high-level basketball teams. We saw this against the Toronto Raptors, who aren't even in the West, they're in the East. And the Toronto Raptors gave them business because AD and LeBron combined for under 35 points. The Raptors absolutely blew out the Los Angeles Lakers. Again, it took AD getting 42 and LeBron getting 22. So what is that, 64 points combination? You have to combine for 64 points in order to beat the Jazz by 8? That's not a great sign. Now, there are a few bright spots of this Los Angeles Lakers team. Dion Waiters has looked way better than I thought he was. Again, I thought Dion Waiters was going to be a liability to this team. I didn't see him being this good as he is offensively, specifically defensively. He's competing on the defensive end, and he's also hitting some big-time threes for them as well, so he looks great. J.R. Smith, I thought would be better than he's looking. He's not looking great as well. Again, when it came to the Dion Waiters, J.R. Smith thing, I really thought that J.R. Smith was going to be the better of the two. It looks like Dion's actually the better player. Again, Dion's younger. Probably more athletic at this stage of his career. Probably maybe the better shooter. I don't know. You can go back and forth on that. But Dion has also played in the NBA last season throughout this year. J.R. Smith's been out of the league for about a year and a half. So, again, that makes a little bit more sense. But, again, I thought J.R. Smith would be better than he was. Kyle Kuzma continues to be this X factor for the Lakers. Again, he's shooting the ball really well. I think he's either just above or just below 50% from three since the bubble started. That's fantastic. I don't think that's sustainable. I think he'll probably dip down to, at best, 44, 43%. I don't think he'll have this closer to 50 number once he gets those volumes of shots up. Only 9 points tonight. Again, in order for the Lakers to comfortably win and to consistently win against high-level basketball teams in the West, I think you need at least 16 points from Kyle Kuzma. Again, with only 9 tonight. AD obviously picked up the slack with 42, but you cannot rely on Anthony Davis to have 42 points every single night. I think you can probably rely on LeBron to have 22 every single night, and you can probably rely on AD to have the same every single night. But if it takes Anthony Davis to get you 42 points or LeBron to have an A+++ game, a generational game again, just to keep you in those games. What's going to happen when you have to face the Los Angeles Clippers in the Western Conference Finals in a 7-game series? This is my fear with the Los Angeles Lakers. Again, Kyle Kuzma is that X factor. I really do believe that if he can just average 16 points a game, the Lakers can make some real noise. But again, it's just tough. Now, I want to switch gears with this Lakers topic for the next 5 minutes or so. After the game tonight, there were some conversations on Twitter and on social media. Where does Anthony Davis rank among teammates that LeBron James has had? And I have to say, I think Anthony Davis is at least the second best player LeBron James has ever played with. I think Dwayne Wade is still number one when you look at legacy, championships, everything like that. LeBron, Anthony Davis is phenomenal and everything, but Dwayne Wade is already an all-time great. But there was a debate between who was the better teammate for LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, or Anthony Davis. Now, it's still hard to tell because it's LeBron's and Anthony Davis's first year together. They're going to be together for the next 3-4 seasons, and AD, I think, will be a Laker beyond LeBron James when he retires, or if, he left again, later in his career, something like that. But we have to really acknowledge how much of a freak Anthony Davis is on the offensive floor. There are very few big men that have been, as athletically gifted and as offensively gifted as he is, right? And there's only one other big right now that I would compare to, Anthony Davis from an offensive standpoint. Maybe Karl Anthony Towns, the way he can, move with the ball, things like that, shoot from three, step backs, everything that Cat can do as well. But AD tonight really just went in his bag, and he completely tore the Utah Jazz defense apart. I mean, good defenders for the Utah Jazz. Everywhere on the floor. He was shooting mid-range jumpers, three-point jumpers, and he was also, attacking the basket as well against Rudy Gobert, who's a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year and will also be a favorite, or he will be in the discussion for Defensive Player of the Year again this year. And for Anthony Davis just to tear him up for 42 points is no slouch. We're accustomed to it because Anthony Davis is such a great player and the Los Angeles Lakers are such a great team record-wise and things like that. But we're taking it for granted how special of an offensive player Anthony Davis is. And again, when in comparison to Kyrie Irving, I think I would probably edge it out for Anthony Davis to be the more talented player. Now, what the Lakers are fortunate enough to have is Anthony, like I just mentioned, Anthony Davis is going to surpass LeBron James. He's not going to, by surpass I mean, he's going to, how do I say it? He's going to succeed LeBron James. While he's playing with him now in the present, the future of the Los Angeles Lakers is Anthony Davis, right? So we're in the Lakers stage of, everyone likes to talk about eras, right? Right now we're in the LeBron AD era for Los Angeles Lakers basketball. 5 years down the line, or 6 or however many years until LeBron James retires or moves on to a different team, maybe later in his career, we will be entering a new era of Lakers basketball, which is AD and blank era of basketball, where I think the Los Angeles Lakers will probably, pair Anthony Davis with some sort of guard, a point guard, who knows, right? And it'll be super fun to watch. The Cavaliers never really got that luxury. When LeBron James left, and even before he left, everybody wanted out, right? Kyrie left, and a lot of other players left as well, but Kyrie, the notable one who left to the Celtics, and then eventually the Nets, right? And also, the Miami Heat really never got a true shot at that, post-LeBron era. It was Wade and Bosh for a little bit, but Bosh got blood clots. Wade had those knee problems. Wade eventually left for Chicago. Chris Bosh was obviously forced to retire. But the Lakers are going to get that luxury. They are going to get Anthony Davis for the long haul, which is why if you're a Lakers fan, I would be so, excited because your window of a championship and your window of success does not end when LeBron James leaves because Anthony Davis is that good. I think he is the best big man in the league. I think he's one of the most talented offensive big men maybe of all time. And again, he's still young. I believe he's only 25 or 26, not to mention what he does on the defensive end as well. I think we're sleeping on Anthony Davis, right? I think he's just overshadowed by LeBron James and how he's supposed to play, Robin to LeBron's Batman. But do not forget, Anthony Davis would be the best player on his team for what? There's 30 teams in the NBA. I'd probably say at least 20 to 25 teams in the NBA. Anthony Davis would be the best player on them. And of course, he's the second best player, you could say, on the Los Angeles Lakers. However, when it comes to the Lakers and previous LeBron James teams, again, the Batman to Robin thing is always what it is. I think that this core between AD, or this relationship between AD and LeBron, resembles more of the dynamic between LeBron and D Wade than it does LeBron and Kyrie, right? Kyrie was very, very much second fiddle to LeBron James, Batman to Robin. In Miami, it wasn't necessarily like that. I think it was more 1A LeBron James, 1B Dwayne Wade. And I think that's what it is in Los Angeles. Because again, it's hard to play Batman when you're the one scoring 42 points, 12 rebounds, and 4 assists. He was the one getting the ball late in the game. Again, he had a huge and 1 3-pointer to kind of end the game, put a dagger in it, with about a minute left in the fourth quarter. A ridiculous and 1 3 from Anthony Davis, who was fouled by Rudy Gobert on the hand. Still drained it, right? It's crazy that a big man can do that. I really do believe that this is more of a 1A, 1B type thing. I think that there's moments and there are spurts where Anthony Davis is the best player on the floor, even when LeBron James is there. Obviously, LeBron James is the better player over a season, but I think there are definitely moments, 5 or 6 minute spurts, maybe even the fourth quarter, like we saw tonight, where Anthony Davis is the best player on the court, and he is the one demanding the ball in those clutch moments in the fourth quarter, which is why if you're a Lakers fan, you should be so excited for the future, not just the presence. Again, it was a huge bounce back win for the Lakers tonight. They clinched the number 1 seed in the West. Congratulations to them. I'm just still not sold on them being a championship team. I think they have the right duo to do it, LeBron and AD. I'm just worried about the surrounding cast going up against a team like the Clippers and like some other teams that I'll be talking about in the next segment. Speaking of that, we're going to take a quick break. On the other side of it, I'm going to be talking about the Houston Rockets and some other teams as well. I told you guys the Houston Rockets are a dark horse team and it might be their year to prove the haters wrong. I think I'm proving myself right so far. We'll get into the Houston Rockets and some other teams right after this short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning in. I just finished talking about the Los Angeles Lakers, so they got a big bounce-back win tonight against the Utah Jazz, solidifying themselves as the first team in the Western Conference, the first seed, that is. And I want to stick with the Western Conference here because there are two teams here that I've been talking about a lot on this show, two of the more exciting teams in the NBA, and I want to start off with the Houston Rockets. The Houston Rockets are legit, man, all right? I said before the bubble started that I think that the Houston Rockets have the chance to, kill two birds with one stone, you could say. And that's what they appear to be doing so far in the bubble. So they won their first game, right? The Houston Rockets, that is, 153-149 against the Dallas Mavericks. In that game, James Harden did his thing, had 49 points. Russell Westbrook had 31. And then when you look at it, how they had their game yesterday or 2 days ago when you're watching this, or listening to this, I should say, they had another phenomenal game against the Milwaukee Bucks in which they won 120-116, right? And in that game, of course, James Harden was phenomenal again. He had 24 points, and Russell Westbrook had 31. So when you look at it now, the Rockets have been beaten two really good teams, right? Including the best team in the Eastern Conference, and currently the best team in the league record-wise, Milwaukee Bucks, pretty soundly now, right? And I mentioned that the NBA this year is going to go as far as their stars go, right? That who knows what officiating is going to be like. The NBA wants their stars to advance, again, more James Harden, Russell Westbrook than the Denver Nuggets is what they would like, right? Or more of, Giannis than the Indiana Pacers. Again, officiating is going to be different for both teams. So I wanted to look, right? How many free throws did James Harden and Russell Westbrook each take, right, during the first 2 games? Has the officiating changed? Is it still regular season officiating pre-bubble, or is it more, post-bubble, right? So let's look at it. So in the first game against Dallas, right, James Harden took 21 free throws. That's more than he usually takes, even on a night where he gets fouled a lot. And Russell Westbrook took 8. So 29 free throws between the two of them, right? Which led James Harden to get 49, and of course Russell Westbrook to get 31. This is against the Mavericks almost, a few nights ago, right? And a big win for them in overtime. And then now, if you look at a couple days ago against the Milwaukee Bucks, how many free throws did they take in that game, right? Well, if you look, James Harden, again, took a lot of free throws. He took 13 that game, and Russell Westbrook took 12. So the officiating appears to have not tightened the whistle as it usually does at this point in the year during playoff pushes the last few weeks of the regular season, last few games. Instead, it has appeared to be business as usual for James Harden, getting to the line whenever he wants. And that's a good thing for the Houston Rockets. They need that to carry on into the playoffs. Now, I mentioned this before. The Rockets and James Harden and Russell Westbrook in particular really want to change the narrative. How can they do it, right? They're both of these outstanding players with outstanding talents, both coming from the Oklahoma City tree. But the main problem with them is that they haven't won anything, right? Both of them made it to an NBA Finals when they were both on the Oklahoma City Thunder. They made it to the Finals against the Big Three Miami Heat, in which LeBron James beat them in 5, and Dwayne Wade and company, right? And since then, none of them, besides Kevin Durant, who was obviously on that team as well, have been able to make it to an NBA Finals. James Harden, who has won an MVP and multiple scoring titles, has not made it to a Finals. I don't think he's even made it past the second round. Oh, no, he has. He made it with that 1 year with Chris Paul, and they obviously lost in that 7-game series after Chris Paul hurt his hamstring. And obviously Russell Westbrook on the flip side of that has been getting knocked out in the first round by Dame Lillard for the past couple of years with OKC, but he's also won an MVP. So both of these guys have been considered the past couple of years to be these great regular season players, these great statistical players, all-time talents, but not all-time winners, choking in the playoffs, that type of thing. Well, since the bubble has started, they haven't been doing that. They've been performing at the highest level, playing the best basketball they can, and it's led to 2 huge victories. Now, if you look at the Houston Rockets schedule, let's see who they have coming up in the next few days. Again, it's hard to judge, how hard it is for these games, right? Because this is still technically the regular season, but, they have the Portland Trailblazers coming up. That'll be a big game for both teams as well. And then after that, they have the Los Angeles Lakers, I believe, on Thursday, which will be the biggest test of the season for them. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch as well. Now, when you look at it, can the Houston Rockets make noise deep into the playoffs this year? That is the big question on everybody's mind. Because, again, they look so good right now coming into the bubble, beating the Milwaukee Bucks, beating the Dallas Mavericks. I expect them to beat the Portland Trailblazers. The Laker game will be much-watched television. It's going to be so much fun to watch. I'm going to argue yes. I really do believe that this could be the Rockets' year. Because, again, there's a mismatch there. What is driving the NBA right now, right? And guards are dominating. Guards have been dominating for a while. Three-point shooting's been dominating, right? They might have the best guard duo in the entire NBA. Maybe it's not even close. James Harden and Russell Westbrook. There are a lot of matchups in the Western Conference, right, that they could potentially have in the playoffs. And there are only a few where I don't like their chances in. The main one being the Los Angeles Clippers, because they also have size, athleticism, and the offense to keep up with the Houston Rockets. But let's say in the second round, the Houston Rockets meet with the Los Angeles Lakers, right? Which is a favorable, or there is a real chance of that. I am not totally convinced that the Los Angeles Lakers would clearly or easily beat the Houston Rockets. There's a big mismatch there. Again, I talked about this time and time again when it comes to, the Los Angeles Lakers, their poor defensive guard play. Now, asking them to guard the best offensive backcourt in the NBA by far would be an impossible task for guys like Alex Caruso, KCP, Dion Waiters, things like that. The Rockets would push that series to 6 or 7 games, in my opinion, especially if James Harden and Russell Westbrook are both putting up 30 bombs. So maybe there is a real chance that the Houston Rockets can make noise. I told you that they were their dark horse team, and I think I'm being right on that. I really do believe they're the dark horse team in the West. They're playing phenomenal basketball right now. It's so much fun to watch. And I talked about this on Twitter a little bit, too. is James Harden maybe the most gifted offensive player of all time, right? I think everyone agrees he's one of the most talented offensive players of all time. But there's some other guys like Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan. But who in NBA history has been able to score this much at will like James Harden has? I think of Will Chamberlain. I think of Michael Jordan as the two guys who have really scored whenever the hell they want consistently like this. There seems to be no solution on defense for James Harden. Absolutely none. He's always going to get his numbers. He's always going to get his shots. Similar to how there was no solution to Michael Jordan and no solution to Will Chamberlain. Those are the only two guys I can think of. But maybe there is a chance I think James Harden could go down as one of the most offensive gifted, or maybe one of the most offensively gifted players of all time, if not the most offensively gifted player of all time. I think to enter those conversations, he just needs at least one championship, and maybe this is the year that the Rockets do it. Do not be surprised if they make a lot of noise. Now, to stick with the Western Conference, there's another team that got a huge bounce-back win tonight, and that was the New Orleans Pelicans. They got their first win of the bubble. They beat the Memphis Grizzlies tonight, and if you want to know why, it's really not that hard to figure out. Tonight, Zion Williamson played meaningful minutes. He did not have a minutes restriction tonight, or if he did, it was very minimal. They beat the Memphis Grizzlies, who are currently the 8th seed right now, right? So the Pelicans are the 11th seed, but again, 9 through 11 is all jumbled up between 1 and 1.5 games, so don't read too much into that. But Memphis is the 8th seed, right? They beat the Memphis Grizzlies by 10 in an absolute huge win for them. And it's no surprise why they did it, right? Zion Williamson tonight in 25 minutes had 23 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. I mean, come on, man. Like, there's only so much you can do to stop this man. He is already one of the best players in the NBA. He's already one of the most efficient players in the NBA. In 25 minutes to get 23 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists, he was a +8 on the floor tonight and played good defense as well. It's absolutely ridiculous stuff. Now, Brandon Ingram also had a phenomenal game as well, and I'll get into him in my next segment about a team he could potentially leave to next offseason. Brandon Ingram tonight, 24 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. Shot great, 50% from the field, 6 out of 10 from the free throw line, and 50% from 3 tonight. He had a fantastic night as well. Some other guys had big nights. Drew Holiday with 15, JJ Redick with 16, and Josh Hart with 15. But the biggest thing on the stat box that points out to me is that Zion Williamson played 25 minutes. Because he's been capping out right now about 25, and Alvin Gentry's been really, putting the minutes in a really weird way, in my opinion, not in the way that I would do them at all. He's been putting minutes in as, he's been starting almost Zion Williamson the first 5 minutes of each quarter and not letting him finish each quarter, and Zion Williamson hasn't been out there in the fourth quarter, at all in any of these games, except for tonight. Tonight he was in there for the last 2 minutes of the game, and he was playing his heart out, and he was phenomenal, and he got the go-ahead buckets, and he was dominating the offensive rebounds. Everything that you can expect from Zion Williamson, he was delivering from. He had a good quote tonight where he was talking about how it felt good to not feel helpless on the sidelines. Being on the bench in the fourth quarter is tough for any player to watch, specifically a player that knows he can make a real impact in the game. But if you remember how the playoffs are going to work, right? If the 9th place team, right, the 9th slot, is within 4 games of the 8th spot, then there is a play-in game. So the Pelicans do not have to get to the 8th seed, right? They do not have to surpass, the Memphis Grizzlies, right? They don't have to surpass them by any means. All they have to do is get to that 9th spot, because if they get to the 9th spot, chances are they're definitely going to be within 4 games. And I think with any team, whatever team is going to be, in that, 9th spot, will have a play-in game. Now, the question is, will the 8th spot be different, right? Will Memphis drop all the way out of the play-in game? I don't see it, but there is a chance, right? So let's just go look at the Western Conference standings real quick. It's very, very close right now, closer than the Eastern Conference is. So when you look at the West, right, it's closer than the East. In the Eastern Conference, it's the Wizards who are trying to, get ahead or close to the Nets. Will they get there? I mean, maybe. I don't really see it, in my opinion. I think there won't even be a play-in game in the East. But when you look at 8, right? So the Trailblazers are 2 games back from the 8th seed. They're in the current 9th seed. The Spurs are also 2 games back from the 8th seed. And the Pelicans are 2.5 games back from the 8th seed. But separating the 9th seed, right? So the 9th seed is what teams need to get to, just to get the play-in game. So forget the Memphis Grizzlies. All they need to do is get to the 8th seed. The Trailblazers currently have the 9th seed, so if the playoffs, or if the bubble ended today, or not the bubble, if the regular season ended today, the play-in game would be between the Grizzlies and the Trailblazers. The Spurs are tied for that 9th seed. The Pelicans are just a half a game out from that 9th seed now after the win tonight against the Memphis Grizzlies. Also, the Kings are really close as well. They're only a game out, and the Suns are a game and a half. So 9 through 13 is separated from a game and a half. The difference between playing in the play-in game versus not being in the play-in game is 9.5. And I still believe if Zion Williamson is going to continuously get those minutes, though they are my favorite in my opinion. I like the Spurs. I understand that they're like this winning franchise. And again, they're making some noise right now. They're tied with the Trailblazers for 9th. I think the Trailblazers or Pelicans are going to be the one playing in the play-in game. If you're a Grizzlies fan, I wouldn't be too overly concerned. They've had a really tough schedule starting off in this bubble and, with the regular season and everything like that. I think that the Grizzlies are going to hang on to the 8th seed, but I do think the play-in game is going to be between, the Grizzlies and Trailblazers or Grizzlies and Pelicans. My money's on the Pelicans if Zion Williamson continues to do what he's doing and gets the minutes that he deserves. Get Zion Williamson consistently. 25 minutes should be the minimum. I want to see Zion Williamson play 35 minutes a game. What if he, how many points would Zion get if he was playing those types of minutes? That's on Alvin Gentry. That's on the Pelicans coaching staff. Again, they just have to get to that 9th seed and they will be in the play-in game. They're only a half a game back right now. I really do believe the Pelicans are going to be that team in the 9th seed and they will be playing in the playoff game. We're going to take another quick break. On the other side of it, we're going to switch gears to the Eastern Conference and talk about two teams that are maybe dark horse teams coming out of the Eastern Conference. One I've talked about a lot and the other not so much. We'll be talking about both of those Eastern Conference teams right after this break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I'm Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for tuning in and continuing to listen to the episode. I just finished talking about the New Orleans Pelicans and Houston Rockets, how they've been doing recently, and how they could make, for the Pelicans, a playoff push, and the Houston Rockets, hopefully, a championship push. I want to switch gears to the Eastern Conference now and talk about two teams that I think are dark horse teams in the East, and I think are teams that are not getting enough love. I feel like we've all just kind of, agreed upon that the Milwaukee Bucks are the best team in the East. And I'm not so sure about that. I think there are a lot of teams that could potentially give them a long series, a series that there's a lot of mismatches in, teams like the Heat, and some other teams as well. But two teams in particular. One I've talked about a lot, and I'll get into them first, and another that I haven't talked about a lot, and I want to talk about how they could potentially make some noise in the postseason, and then in the offseason land a guy who might be leaving his team due to basketball fit. But let's start off with the Boston Celtics. I've talked about the Boston Celtics a lot and how I think they are the dark horse championship team, right? I've talked about how there's a lot of dark horse teams, right? I said that the Pelicans are the dark horse team to make the playoffs in the West. I said the Houston Rockets are the dark horse team in the West. But I think the dark horse team from the entire NBA to actually win a championship is the Boston Celtics. I think they are the only team who can actually give the Clippers a legitimate run for their money matchup-wise, right? Besides the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, I've said I think the Lakers can give them a fight. I just think that the Clippers would win in 7. And I think that the only reason why the Lakers would even be in that series is because of LeBron and Anthony Davis. I think this Boston Celtics versus Los Angeles Clippers NBA Finals is interesting. Because the Clippers are very long, very athletic, good shooting, right? if any team is just as long and athletic and good shooting as the Clippers, it's the Boston Celtics. Guys like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, all long athletic guys who can shoot. And then there's also great guard play for them as well with Kemba Walker. So that's an interesting matchup. But for the Boston Celtics, the X factor for them has always been Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum needs, and I talked about this earlier. I thought that maybe for the Boston Celtics, the only way that they were going to be true contenders would be for Kemba Walker would need to be the best team on, or the best player on the team in order for them to get a championship. That Jason Tatum, Jason Tatum can be great, but Kemba Walker needs to be better. And I want to walk that statement back because I don't know if it's possible for Kemba Walker to be better, right? Everyone says that Kemba Walker is the best player on the Celtics, right? Everyone going into the season, everything like that. Oh, Kemba Walker is the best player on the Celtics. He's the leader of that team. Are we sure Jason Tatum isn't the best player on the Celtics, right? Because against the Portland Trail Blazers, after he had a terrible first game against the Milwaukee Bucks, he came back and scored 34 points, 8 assists, and 4 rebounds on 50% from the field, 5 of 8 from 3, right? And was let me check right now real quick. And he was a +6, ±, right? So Jason Tatum in 40 minutes had 34 points, again, 8 assists, 4 rebounds. Absolutely ridiculous stuff. And again, Kemba Walker is great, but he's working his way back from an injury, only had 14 points in that Portland game, and they didn't need him to win. All they needed was Jason Tatum, and also another X factor for the Boston Celtics is Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown reminds me a lot of Kawhi Leonard, and I know that's crazy because Kawhi Leonard is a top 3, maybe even top 4, or top 5, maybe even top 3 basketball player in the entire world. But when you think about it, Jaylen Brown is this uber athletic small forward / guard who's very well versed defensively, can stand his ground, is strong. But what Jaylen Brown has really been working on the past couple of years, and it's really starting to show this season, is his offensive game. Jaylen Brown against the Portland Trail Blazers had 30 points, and he shot 10 of 18 from the field and 6 of 8 from 3. Jaylen Brown is a very, 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 very good three-point shooter. Now, I've talked about the X factor for the Celtics being Jason Tatum. Now, if Jason Tatum plays at this level, I think he's the best player on the Celtics. Now, if the Celtics want to take even another leap and really compete with the Bucks and maybe come out of the Eastern Conference and do for an NBA championship, if Jaylen Brown continues to play like this as well, like he did against Portland, and Jason Tatum doing his thing, and Kemba Walker slowly working his way back from an injury, the Celtics are a serious problem, right? They are legitimately... My biggest concern with the Boston Celtics, honestly, is their bench, because I see Marcus Smart and a bunch of nobodies, to be honest with you. But again, when you have 4 studs, right? Jaylen Brown, Kemba Walker, Jason Tatum, Gordon Hayward, by the way, Gordon Hayward, 22 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 of 5 from 3, 6 of 10. He's been a phenomenal player for them as well. It looks like we're finally seeing the Gordon Hayward, pre-injury he had, that first week against the Cavaliers. What is it now? 2.5 years ago now? Wow, that feels like yesterday. So when you're 4 deep like that, it's great because you can live with a terrible bench, or not a terrible bench, an average bench. Again, Marcus Smart's a great bench player, right? The only thing is you can live with it because then you can, leave somebody out there, right? Gordon Hayward or Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum or Kemba Walker, if they're out there with a bench unit, they can make the bench unit look a lot better than it is. There's not going to be a lot of times where all 4 of those guys are on the bench unless the game is like a blowout or something like that. So they're not as deep as the Los Angeles Clippers, but when I look at their starting 5, I could see them seriously competing with the Los Angeles Clippers as long as guys like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown don't revert back to 13 points a game Jaylen Brown or 14 point a game Jason Tatum. If they're consistently over 20 points a game, Jason Tatum plays legitimate defense, Jaylen Brown plays elite defense, right? I could trust Jaylen Brown to guard a Paul George or guard a Kawhi Leonard to the best of his abilities. Not, obviously, no one's going to stop Kawhi or Paul George from getting their shots and getting their buckets, but just contain them, make life difficult for them. Jaylen Brown can absolutely be trusted to do that, right? And Jason Tatum, I think, can as well, and Marcus Smart as well. So the Celtics, to me, are the dark horse in the entire NBA. Now, they have a couple of big games coming up. They play the Heat. That's going to be a big game for them as well. But again, they're super athletic. They're super long, and they're super young as well. The only thing I need from them, and I think Kemba Walker will work his way back from the injury, and that's another question mark for them, right? Because Jason Tatum can be great, and he can be getting 30 a game, and let's say Jaylen Brown is getting 20 a game, right? if Kemba Walker can get back into that 22 to 25 range, and the Celtics have 3, maybe even 4, depending on Gordon Hayward, 20-point scores, there's not a lot of teams that can match up with that defensively. Only a few teams, I think, can do that. And I think one of those teams is the Clippers, not the Lakers, in my opinion, because, again, that poor defensive guard play. Maybe the Miami Heat, maybe the Milwaukee Bucks, but they have the question marks of their own, so I wouldn't bet on them taking that series, right? It wouldn't surprise me at all if the Celtics and Bucks meet in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Celtics are just too much of outmatching the Bucks when it comes to guard play, when it comes to offense, when it comes to shooting. I think it's a real legitimate threat, and I really do believe there's a chance, and there's a pretty good chance, in my opinion, that the Boston Celtics come out of the East. And again, against them versus the Clippers, that's a close series. I'd probably go with the Clippers, but I almost feel like the Celtics would give a better fight against the Clippers than maybe a team like the Los Angeles Lakers will. Now, the other team in the East I want to talk about is a team that everybody's sleeping on, and nobody's giving enough credit to, and that's the Toronto Raptors, man. The Toronto Raptors today beat the Miami Heat. They are 2-0 in the bubble. Who do they beat? They beat they absolutely obliterated the Los Angeles Lakers. They tore them apart and held Anthony Davis and LeBron James to under 35 points combined. Then they play the Miami Heat, and who's been taking over the Miami Heat recently? We know I've talked about a lot on this show. Duncan Robinson has really emerged as one of the best three-point shooters in the league. Duncan Robinson is really the key for the Miami Heat offense. I mean, Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler are phenomenal as well. We already know that, right? But Duncan Robinson has really been their third best player and really, shooting the light out of the ball and being one of the best offensive weapons in the game. Do you want to know what Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Duncan Robinson combined for today against the Heat? 29 points. 29 points. Jimmy Butler only had 16, Bam Adebayo with only 10, and Duncan Robinson with only 3 points. He only made 1 3, and he didn't even get a lot of shots up because he was being defended so aggressively, right? The Toronto Raptors have the best defense in the league, right? We always talk about the Clippers, and we always talk about the Lakers have a great defense, and the Bucks. The Toronto Raptors have the best defense in the league, and I think Nick Nurse is coach of the year. They lost Kawhi Leonard. They have a better record at this point of the season than they did last year, and they won a championship. Pascal Siakam has taken another step, and guys like Fred VanVleet have taken another step too. Fred VanVleet today against the Miami Heat had a whopping 36 points. 36 points. He hit 13 of 13 from the free throw line, 8 of 16 from the field, 7 of 12 from 3. Ridiculous stuff. He had a career day, right? Pascal Siakam got 22, Serge Ibaka with 15, Kyle Lowry with 14, right? Things like that. Not to mention their top defense, right? So, I've talked about some dark horse teams. I've talked about the Boston Celtics, how good they are. I've talked about the Heat and how good I think they are. I've talked about the Bucks and how they're probably the favorites to come out of the East. Why aren't we showing enough love to the Toronto freaking Raptors, man? They play the best defense in the league. They're the best defensive positioning in the league. And guys are stepping up. Guys are taking the next step. And I know this is such a cliche thing to say championship DNA and, oh my God, they're the defending champions. But they're the defending champions for a reason. It was not just Kawhi Leonard. It was their defense. It was Serge Ibaka. It was Fred VanVleet. It was Pascal Siakam, right? The only reason why I'm not supremely confident in the Raptors and why I still don't give them a great chance against the Milwaukee Bucks and some other top teams in the East or even some top teams in the West, despite them beating the Los Angeles Lakers and the Miami Heat today, is because I still think they're missing that alpha dog scorer, super versatile, right? Can Pascal Siakam become that? 100%. Am I 100% positive, though, that Pascal Siakam can be the best player on a championship team? I'm not positive. But do you want to know who I think can, with the right development and taking one more step than he already is right now? The first-time All-Star Brandon Ingram. Now, hear me out. This might be a crazy theory, right? But I think the Toronto Raptors have a top 3 coach in the league and maybe the best coach in the league besides Greg Popovich, Nick Nurse, right? I think he should win Coach of the Year again. I know he won it last year. I don't care. He lost Kawhi Leonard and this team got a better record. They're not going to win a championship like they did last year, but they're also the best defensive team in the league, right? And they're working with guys. They have the best player development in the league, in my opinion. Siakam, Fred VanVleet, all that, right? Brandon Ingram is playing currently with the New Orleans Pelicans, and when Zion Williamson and him are on the court together, Brandon Ingram is not a good player. He's not. They do not have a good basketball fit, right? I think Brandon Ingram is a phenomenal player. Reminds me a lot of a poor man's Kevin Durant, and I think that's exactly what he is. Now, a poor man's Kevin Durant makes him seem worse than he actually is. Brandon Ingram can totally be a 25-point-per-game scorer in this league. Super versatile, super long, has defensive potential as well. He's a phenomenal player. I believe he's 22 or 23 years old. He's obviously a first-time All-Star this year. He's really developed nicely, and he's a great player for the New Orleans Pelicans. The problem is that he doesn't fit with Zion Williamson on the court. and he's coming up, in free agency this year, and someone's going to offer him the max. Someone's going to give him the max that he's eligible for to go play for them, right? Teams like the Knicks are also going to be interested, some other teams as well. And the question is, are the Pelicans going to bring him back or not? Again, he's not a fit basketball-wise with Zion Williamson. They both need the ball in their hands. They're both forwards. They both kind of clog the lane sometimes. Or Zion really clogs the lane for Brandon Ingram, which doesn't help him. Brandon Ingram needs that space to either take the three or drive to the lane. The more space Brandon Ingram has, the better, right? How about this? How about the Raptors getting Brandon Ingram? Right? What's the biggest hole, in my opinion, for the Raptors right now? They need a small forward, one that was replacing Kawhi Leonard. Who's going to replace Kawhi Leonard, right? I don't know if there's anybody better for them to do in free agency than Brandon Ingram. Again, the best player development coaching staff in the entire league, in my opinion. They develop guys like Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet. You already know, so, right? Brandon Ingram is already averaging 23 points a game. What do you think if he could take another step, get to 25, 26, 27 points per game in the Toronto system? They already play the best defense in the league. If you consider Brandon Ingram a liability on the defensive end, they could hide him. They could, make him look better than he is because of how good their defense is already. He's also a young player, which fits their young sort of mantra, young team already. Having a starting lineup then would be really good in my opinion of Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, Brandon Ingram, Pascal Siakam, Marc Gasol. That's a starting five that can win a championship, in my opinion. That would put the Toronto Raptors right back at the top of the East with the Milwaukee Bucks, Boston Celtics, all of them. Again, that's the only reason why I don't necessarily trust them to win a championship. Now, if Kawhi Leonard was still on the Toronto Raptors and didn't go to Los Angeles Clippers, the Toronto Raptors would be the favorite to win the championship, in my opinion. That is how good defense of a team they are, right? To recap, just in the bubble alone, they held LeBron James and Anthony Davis, the best duo in the entire league, to under 35 points. And then they held Duncan Robinson, who's a top 3 shooter in the league, Jimmy Butler, who's a top 10 player in the league, and Bam Adebayo, who might win most improved player. Those 3 guys alone, they held them all to under 29 points combined. They're the best defense in the league, and it's not even freaking close, and we're sleeping on them. Do not be surprised. I won't be surprised if they make some noise. Seriously, they might get back to the Eastern Conference Finals, and they might give Milwaukee or Boston a run for their money. They might shock the world and beat Milwaukee in the second round, or beat a Boston in the second round, because that's how good they play defense, and they're the second best team in the East record-wise, and nobody's talking about them. Shout out Nick Nurse. Shout out the Toronto Raptors. They're a phenomenal team, phenomenally coached team. They're incredible. A lot of people give Kyle Lowry crap because he flops and stuff like that. That's the game of basketball, man. That's how it works. That's what James Harden's doing. That's what Jimmy Butler does. That's what everybody does. That's how the game works nowadays. They're a really good team to watch. They're not the most exciting team to watch because they're always in these defensive shootouts and they don't score a lot of points in comparison to other teams because they're too busy locking up everybody on the defensive end. But again, they're the best defensive team in the league. If they could add a guy like Brandon Ingram in free agency, I think that'd be best for the Raptors, but also for Brandon Ingram. I think he could be the number 1 option on a championship team. That'd be phenomenal for his career, and I really do believe he could take the next step. All right, we're going to take one final break. On the other side of this last break, we're going to be giving you all of the NFL news this past week, going through some NFL stuff, Shady McCoy to the Bucks. We're going to be talking about that as well as Antonio Brown and Josh Gordon potentially to the Seahawks. I'll talk a little bit more about the Seahawks, what it means for them, how interesting could that be if that signing were to happen, or if both those signings were to happen. We'll get into that all right after this break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I just finished talking about the Boston Celtics and Toronto Raptors and how I think they are both dark horse candidates in the NBA to potentially contend for a championship this season. I don't think we're giving the Toronto Raptors enough credit. I think Nick Nurse might be the best coach in basketball. I want to quickly now transition for the next couple minutes or so to the NFL. Now, there's been a couple pieces of news that have really stood out recently. The first one that happened a couple of days ago, LaShawn McCoy has found a new home. And now, usually that wouldn't be the biggest deal. You know, LaShawn McCoy is on maybe the last leg of his career. He's 32 years old. I think he's a still productive player. He was on the Chiefs last year. Obviously had a phenomenal career with Philly and Buffalo. He's still a really, really elite player in short spurts, I think. But he landed with a really interesting team. He landed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, a lot of people assume that he was actually going to go back to Philadelphia and retire there, which I thought would have made a lot of sense too, considering they lost Jordan Howard to the Miami Dolphins. And they just have Miles Sanders back there, but it appears that Philly's really trusting Miles Sanders to be the lead back and go all in with everything with him. So he lands with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, LaShawn McCoy does. And I want to just recap everything going on now with the Tampa Bay offense. So Tampa Bay offense has Tom Brady at the helm, Rob Gronkowski and O.J. Howard at tight end, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans at the receiver position. And now at running back, there's three backs they can go with, right? There's Ronald Jones, who's been the lead back the past 2 seasons, and he hasn't been the greatest, but he's also never gotten a real chance sort of thing. There's Keyshawn Vaughn, who they drafted out of Vanderbilt, who a lot of people like, a lot of people are high on, specifically in fantasy football, if you play that. And then now there's LaShawn McCoy, who's the veteran of the two, right? Ronald Jones and Keyshawn Vaughn are two very, very, very young players. LaShawn McCoy is 32, and he's up there, he's older, right? Now, who is going to win that battle, in my opinion? I'm actually going to go with LaShawn McCoy, right? I think LaShawn McCoy is going to be the lead back in Tampa Bay. Now, is there going to be, I don't think he's going to be a true lead back. I don't think he's going to be getting, whatever it is, 30 touches a game sort of thing. I think they are going to do running back by committee, but I think the lead back and who will be in the back end, those crucial third down plays, the end of the game, I think they're going to go with LaShawn McCoy. And I think this is what I want to talk about with the Bucs for the next few minutes or so. With everything going on with COVID-19, there's less practices than usual, there's no preseason games, everything's kind of out of sorts. You have to remember, Tom Brady is already coming from a new city, a new team. He's been in New England, he's been in Boston, he's been with the Patriots, he's been with Belichick, he's been with Kraft, he's been with Edelman, he's been with all of that for the last 20 years. By the way, happy 43rd birthday, Tom Brady. For the past 20 years, he's been there. And now he's going to Tampa Bay, Florida with a new coach, a new owner, new offensive weapons, everything like that. Tom Brady, even in his New England days, has never been the type of guy that you surround with young players so they can mold and develop and get better. Tom Brady is in win-now mode. He's in win-now mode. He's not here for the nonsense. He's not here for the BS. I don't really think he's here to teach anybody, in my opinion. I don't think he's really in it for that. I think he's in to win a championship this year with Tampa Bay. So what I've talked about over the past couple of episodes is, early on in the season, it's going to be the Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski show. I really do believe that. I think those two already have a continuity together. They already have a relationship together. Tom Brady knows how he can throw the ball to Rob Gronkowski. He knows there's certain spots in the field where Gronk's going to be. And before he develops a real relationship with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, he's going to have that relationship with Rob Gronkowski. And slowly over time, instead of Gronk being the number 1 or number 2 target, it'll be Chris Godwin, it'll be Mike Evans, more things like that. Now, a quarterback, he has to develop, again, that relationship with receivers, with guys who are catching the ball. Not necessarily when it comes to running back. Yes, they catch the ball out of the backfield a lot, and LaShawn McCoy certainly catches the ball out of the backfield a lot as well. But those routes are usually wheel routes or quick out routes, something that doesn't take a lot of time, a ton of things to practice, right? When it comes to wide receivers and tight ends, there's every route in the route tree, timing, ball placement. Where do you like the ball? You like it high, you like it low, you like it in your chest, when you're covered, contested, all that stuff, a spin, rotation, all that stuff, right? So it'll take longer. But when it comes to camp, Tom Brady, right, is going to look, and I can tell you right now that LaShawn McCoy will look better than Keyshawn Vaughn, who's a rookie, right? Just because he's been in the league when it comes to camp and these practices. And I'm going to bet that LaShawn McCoy, with some rest on his body and everything like that, he didn't have a huge role with Kansas City last year, might actually look better than Ronald Jones, especially early in the season in training camp. Again, with less practices, the more LaShawn McCoy is going to look better because he'll have fresh legs, everything like that. And I really do believe Tom Brady is in sort of this LeBron James mode now, the mogul phase, right, that some people like to call it in the national media, where he's not here to teach people, he's not here to teach young kids, right? LeBron played with that 1 year with Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, all those young guys, traded all of them for Anthony Davis, a grown-up, things like that. Tom Brady isn't here to mess around and teach Keyshawn Vaughn and Ronald Jones how to play in the offense, or even really teach O.J. Howard how to play in the offense, right? He goes out and he gets Rob Gronkowski, things like that, and now they're getting LaShawn McCoy, another grown-up. They're all in. This is for the championship, man. This isn't for the future. This is for the present. And I really do believe LaShawn McCoy is going to be the lead back for this team. Now, what are some reasonable expectations for what LaShawn McCoy can do? I wouldn't be surprised at all if at the very beginning of the year they do run the ball a lot, because again, they're still working on the relationship with all of those guys. But where do I expect LaShawn McCoy or Shady McCoy to make the most impact, honestly? I expect to see Shady McCoy make the most impact in the passing game. Now, if you look up some research, LaShawn McCoy is actually a pretty decent blocking back. He's also a veteran, so he probably knows and has practiced a lot more blocking in the backfield than some of these other guys have had. So that'll definitely put him on the field more. But also in the passing game is where I really see LaShawn McCoy being a threat. Tom Brady loves to throw to backs, right? He's always thrown to have guys like James White, Rex Burkhead, Danny Woodhead, all throughout the years. There's always been some sort of third down back that's a little bit undersized and that's a lot quicker than a lot of people that Tom Brady has loved to throw to. LaShawn McCoy is going to be that guy for Tom Brady. And when the defense is, against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, is going to be all spread out trying to worry how are we going to cover Rob Gronkowski, how are we going to cover O.J. Howard, how are we going to cover Mike Evans, how are we going to cover Chris Godwin. LaShawn McCoy will always, for the most part, instead of being matched up on safeties, which is what he would be matched up with when he was in Philly or with Buffalo because they were trying to take LaShawn McCoy away, right? When you want to neutralize a running back, you usually put a safety on him, or neutralize a running back in the passing game, I should say. You should usually put him on a safety, right? But instead, those safeties are going to be matched up on Gronk. Those are the guys that are going to have to take out the tight ends, right? You're more scared of Gronk than you are at Shady McCoy at this stage of his career, right? So then Shady McCoy's going to be matched up on linebackers and have way easier and a ton of more mismatches given his speed, despite him being 32. And I think there's going to be a lot of wheel routes, a lot of dump-offs, a lot of checkdowns to LaShawn McCoy early on in the year. Also, LaShawn McCoy in the run game as well is going to have a huge impact as well. LaShawn McCoy's a veteran. He knows the holes that he needs to hit. He's got good vision for a running back. He's always had that. He's one of the better running backs in the league when he was in his prime, if not the best running back in the league during his prime, you could argue potentially. And no one is going to stack the box against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? No one is going to put 8 to 10 people in the box to stop the run against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You got to double Mike Evans. You got to double Chris Godwin. You got to figure out how to neutralize Gronk. O.J. Howard is super talented tight end. And Tom Brady's going to want to throw the ball, right? Bruce Arians is going to want to throw the ball. So there's not going to be a single play really much this year where they're stacking the box to block LaShawn McCoy. That opens up gaps. That opens up holes for him as well. So I expect to actually see LaShawn McCoy make a huge impact. And while this is a little bit of an underrated, under-the-radar sighting that nobody's talking about, don't be surprised if it makes a big impact, specifically early on in the season for Tom Brady. Again, Tom Brady is no nonsense, doesn't want to teach anybody anything. He's going for the win, wants to play with veterans. Sean McCoy makes a lot of sense. All right, quickly for the next 3 minutes or so, another report came out about the Seahawks, kind of confirming some other reports that have been talked about. The Seattle Seahawks are interested in signing Antonio Brown and bringing back Josh Gordon as well. Now, we have a clear sort of punishment and clarity on the situation of Antonio Brown. No matter what team he's signed with, he will be missing 8 games, right? But what's different is he doesn't have to be signed with a team to serve his 8-game suspension. It's just happening. He cannot, once week 8 of the regular season starts, he served that suspension and he can play with a team. I am now fully expecting Antonio Brown to be a Seattle Seahawk. I think they won't wait till week 8 to sign him. They want him to get into practice. I'm pretty sure while you're on the suspension, you can still practice and run routes with Russell Wilson and all that good stuff. So he will be brought back in. I really do believe Antonio Brown's going to be a Seattle Seahawk. This has been a long time coming. I think Russell Wilson really wants AB on this team. Pete Carroll's a player-friendly coach, has had some guys who have made some mistakes in the past or have some off-the-field issues. And they've brought him in and they've worked out just fine. So I really do believe Antonio Brown's going to be a Seahawk. Now, adding Josh Gordon to the mix is also interesting because I think he's trying to get reinstated into the NFL again. I don't know if he'll be serving a suspension, but let's say by week 8 of the season, you have Antonio Brown, Josh Gordon, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Russell Wilson. championship offense. And I've talked about this before. This year is the year of the Seattle Seahawks. I think Russell Wilson is underappreciated. People are starting to wake up and see how good he is. Again, after this season, in my opinion, he's going to have the greatest quarterback passer rating for a career of all time. I think he's going to pass Aaron Rodgers on that. I think he's going to win this division, right? They add Jamal Adams. They still might bring back Jadeveon Clowney, right? If they bring in Clowney and they bring in Jamal Adams and they bring in Antonio Brown and bring back Josh Gordon, still have Tyler Lockett, still have DK Metcalf, who will develop and probably take another step. The Seattle Seahawks are going to win 13, 14 games this year, folks. They're going to go to the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. At that point, it's a toss-up. I don't want to bet against the Chiefs. That's how good Patrick Mahomes is. I'm telling you, Russell Wilson for MVP this year. The Seahawks are going to look really good. Bringing in Antonio Brown, bringing in Josh Gordon is only going to make Russell Wilson better. Again, Russell Wilson has been dealing with crap on the defensive end, crap on the offensive line, and subpar weapons, and all he does is guarantee you a winning season every single year of his career, something no other quarterback has done in NFL history. Imagine what you're going to do when you bring him back weapons, when you bring him back a good defense. He's already won a Super Bowl with that type of stuff before. Imagine what he'll do with an elite receiving core and a better defense. Forget the offensive line. He'll make it work. Russell Wilson's a special player. The Seattle Seahawks could be a special team this year. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I really hope Antonio Brown goes to the Seahawks. I want to watch him back on the field again after he serves his suspension, obviously. And Josh Gordon would be a lot of fun, too. All right, that is going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast, and also leave us a 5-star review. We'd appreciate all of those things. Again, thank you so much for watching to this episode, and I will see you all in the next one.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.